Immigration is a really hot topic these days. There's a lot of contention around immigration. The reason why is because with immigration, you want that the people that are immigrating to your country to accept the laws, the values, the ideologies in which your country is based upon. So you want someone who's immigrating to the United States to become an American, to have the American dream and share the laws and perspectives and worldviews and want to integrate into that society and ideology. Someone's immigrating to Canada, you want someone to accept the Canadian premise. Westerner people who come into Western countries, you want them to accept the premise of what that Western country is based on. Absorb the culture, absorb the laws, absorb the dreams and aspirations that that country strives for, and the members of that country strive for. So check out this clip with Dave Rubin and Gad Saad talking about immigration and sort of the relevance that it has today. But before we watch that clip, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
What do you see as the future for Canada? You know, America seems to be turning around right now.
Yeah.
We seem like we got to the precipice, we looked into the abyss, and we're coming back. I don't see that moment for you guys just yet.
You're exactly right. You really needed a cataclysmic figure like Donald Trump to be able to turn things around. Now, anybody who comes in is going to be better than Justin Trudeau. So there is going to be an improvement of sorts, but it certainly will not be anything like what Donald Trump has been able to now, invigorate and so on. So I'm cautiously optimistic that things will improve, but unfortunately the demographic realities in Canada in general and in Quebec and Montreal in particular are so astounding that I don't see how. I mean, it'll just be a slow walk into the abyss of infinite lunacy, really.
That's got to be tough to sit with as a Canadian. I mean, you lived through this once already.
Exactly.
I mean, Lebanon was a Christian country.
Within our lifetime, right? Lebanon was about 65% Christian, and now it's flipped the other way around. It's about 65% Muslim, and it didn't take 500 years. It took 40, 50 years. And so things can quickly change. And usually you can predict. There's a book by a gentleman by the name of, he's a missionary from Africa. His name is Peter Hammond. He wrote a book a few years ago where he looked at what happens to a society as a function of the percentage of people who are of the Islamic faith. 0 to 2%, or they're just a exotic minority, 3 to 5%. They're a bit more politically, motivated, but they're still pretty quiet. And you could predict it as easily as the trajectory of diabetes, right? With more Islam comes more problems. And at one point you close your eyes, you open them, and then the whole society is Islamic.
What would you do if you were Prime Minister of Canada?
So certainly no one can stay in Canada who does not share the foundational deontological principles of Canada, right? So there can't be a two-tier system where we can criticize vigorously any religion except one, because that would be Islamophobic. There is a motion that was passed at the table called M103 that, can make it very difficult to criticize Islam, because you would be spreading hate and division and lack of community cohesion, and that was under Justin Trudeau. So I would certainly halt immigration from any society that does not share our values. Look, I'll give you an analogy from evolutionary psychology. And when you're choosing a mate, one of the best ways to ensure that you're going to have a successful marriage is what's called assortative mating, meaning birds of a feather flock together. If I share the same values as my mate, I'm much more likely to have, it's not difficult to understand, right? Well, you could apply that exact same mechanism. I call it cultural homophily, cultural liking of similar others, right? So you're much more likely to integrate people from Denmark or Sweden or Estonia, not because they may share your skin hue or not, but because they're likely to share some of those foundational values that the West was built on. Regrettably, many other societies don't. And so I would certainly reduce that greatly, and I would very vigorously deport anyone who adheres to those kinds of antithetical principles.
Do you think the average Canadian is just kind of sitting around like, Trump save us at this point? I mean, Trudeau showed up to Mar-a-Lago just a couple days ago and basically kissed the ring, and now it sounds like even he's going to do something as it pertains to the border and everything else.
I hate to say this because I like to always be smiling and optimistic, but I also like to be truthful.
Yeah.
I'm not very optimistic for the following reason. So I can walk in my neighborhood in Montreal, which is there are a lot of Jews, there are a lot of people who support my message, who'll come up to me who are fans. Dear Dr. Saad, I love you for reasons X, Y, Z. The next question I ask him, do you mind if I ask who you vote for? Oh, I voted for the Liberal Party. So that disconnect, I love you, Dr. Saad, but I voted for the Liberal Party, and I will continue to do so for the next 17 generations, and there will never be any autocorrection in my political voting behavior. How could you resolve the problem if I can never get you to change your behavior?
So do you see any way, I mean, not just with Canada, but with, say, Germany and France and Denmark and some of these other countries going through this, do you see any solution that ultimately is not violent to this? Because it seems to me that the people who either have suicidal empathy or ostrich parasitic syndrome, that it's almost too late. It might have not been too late 10 years ago to have dealt with this appropriately, but now, as you mentioned, it's a numbers game that I don't see a real way to get out of.
I don't either. And when you and I have known each other now for probably about a decade, and certainly a decade before that, if not more, I'd been saying that if we continue on this trajectory, we're going to have a repeat of the Beirut that I escaped. And people would say, that's such an exaggeration. That's so hyperbolic. That's so silly. I understand you had, this childhood trauma. Don't project it onto the West. It'll never happen. Well, you have to have the imagination to be able to extrapolate these patterns, right? It won't happen next year. It won't happen in 10 years, but give it enough time and it has to happen. There's no right? So we won't amputate your legs the first day you get diabetes, but let it rage far enough and it will lead to the amputation of your limbs. That's what's going to happen.
So what do you make about what happened here in America? Because again, I think we really looked at the abyss and decided not to do it. I think that's really what this election was.
So I'm very optimistic that, of course, I'm elated that Trump won. But right away, I started warning people, don't be complacent, because that could just be a little bleep, but then the wokester come back even stronger than ever before. So it took about 50 to 100 years for many of these cultural values to lead us to where we were. Hopefully, it won't take 50 to 100 years to reverse them, but it won't begin and end with Trump.
What do you think of that, guys? Love to hear your comments below. And if you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. Would love to stay in touch. Take care.